My job here right now is to open the system unit and show you the 4 core components of computer hardware. Now, most system units or computer cases have lockers here, and to open it, you just hold the locker and you open like this. Most of the time, there are no screws.
You may already know that there are many important parts inside a computer, but what exactly do they do? Let's take a look inside and learn about the various components that make a computer work. Whether it's a desktop computer or a laptop, every computer has a large circuit board called a motherboard. This contains some of the most important parts of the computer, such as the CPU, also known as the Central Processing Unit or processor. The CPU can be considered the brain of the computer because it processes information and carries out commands. Since it tends to get hot, it's covered by a piece of metal called a heatsink, which draws heat away from the processor. The motherboard also contains the computer's RAM, or random access memory. This is the short-term memory that the computer uses whenever it's performing calculations. However, you cannot store your files there, because the RAM is cleared when you shut off the computer. The hard drive provides long-term storage, keeping all of the computer's data even when it's turned off. Many hard drives use a magnetic platter to store data, but many newer computers have solid-state drives, which are faster and more durable, but also more expensive. On many desktop computers, the motherboard has expansion slots that allow you to upgrade by adding expansion cards. You can add a video card to get better graphics performance, or you can add a wireless card to connect to your wireless home network. Most laptops, however, don't have expansion slots. Of course, the computer's components need electricity to run. The power supply unit is designed to take power from the wall outlet and send it to all of the different components that need power. Laptops also contain a built-in battery that lets you use them anywhere. A computer is a pretty complex machine, but now that you've seen what goes on inside, it should be a little less mysterious.
Alright, good morning once again. I welcome you to lesson 6 of our computer literacy course, and today we want to look at computer hardware components. These hardware components are the physical devices and components that make a computer work. So our job today is to discover what they are and what they do. For you to be able to understand computers well, you need to know the hardware that makes the computer work. And this will help you know how to get a faster computer, understand what is happening when your computer is slow, understand what you need to do to be able to make your computer faster, or when your computer gets a problem, you have an understanding of where the problem is coming from and how to fix simple problems. Sometimes you turn on your computer and there's no display on the screen. It doesn't mean you should go and call a technician before that problem can be fixed. For all you know, it is a VGA port that has no received connection. For all you know, it's a power cable to the monitor that has not been plugged in well. And so every computer literate needs some basic education on computer hardware components. So that is what we hope to achieve today. Now, what is computer hardware? Computer hardware refers to all the physical parts of a computer system that you can see and touch. Whenever you are looking for a definition for computer hardware, the definition you'll be getting is this. Computer hardware refers to all the physical parts of a computer. Sometimes we will add that you can see and touch. This is a definition we give to hardware, and it is okay because when we talk about hardware, we are really talking about the physical machine. Now, there's a part of the computer that is not physical, and that part is a software part. The software is what operates when you turn it on. When you turn on the computer, whatever goes on inside is software. How the computer operates is software. What you use a computer to do is software. But it is a hardware that we use to control the computer. It is a hardware that gives us display of what is going on. It is a hardware that does the processing within the computer. And every task in a computer is controlled by a certain hardware. So we want to look at the various hardware. Now, it says that this includes all the electronic circuits, chips, cables, ports, and all other connected components and devices. And all other connected components and devices. So with what we are talking about all the components that are within the system unit or within your laptop. And we are also talking about any other component you will connect externally. Sometimes we connect printers to our computers. Sometimes we connect cameras to our computers. Sometimes we connect cables to other computers. Any other component you can connect to your computer is also hardware. Hardware is typically directed by software to execute any command or instruction. What you have to understand about hardware is that every hardware is controlled by software. And also I can say that every software is controlled by hardware. Alright. When you connect anything to a computer, it needs a software before it will work. When you connect a keyboard, there's a software that controls keyboard. When you connect a pen drive, there's a software that controls pen drive. Whatever you connect to a computer, there's a software that controls it, and we'll get more into that. So what is computer hardware component? When we talk about computer hardware components, it includes the monitor, the keyboard, mouse, and the computer case or system unit. It also includes all the parts inside the computer case, such as the hard disk drive, the motherboard, the video card, the sound card, and many more. There are many different kinds of hardware components that are installed inside and others connected to the outside. Okay, first of all, let's point out some of the components here. This is a monitor. This is a keyboard. This one is what? Mouse. And this one here is the system unit. Inside the system unit, we have a CPU, we have a motherboard, we have a sound card, we have network card, we have power supply unit, we have random access memory, that's a RAM. We can connect modems and routers. All of these things, we'll get into them later. Let's start with the basics. Now, when you are learning about computer hardware, you will come across this phrase, computer peripherals, or this word, peripherals. Who can tell me what a computer peripheral is? Okay, computer hardware component is equal to core components plus peripherals. So we have core components and we have peripherals. When you join the two, then you get computer hardware components. So when we are studying about computer components, you need to understand what peripherals are and what core components are. Now, just by explanation, before we look at examples, when you hear core components and peripheral, what comes to your mind? Now, peripheral can also be an English term, and it can be used outside IT. Before I define what a peripheral is, I just want to say something simple. Are there some components that when they are disconnected, the computer will still work? Are there some components like that? Or when they are not connected, the computer will still work? Yes. For example, okay, a router or a printer. If you don't have a printer, can you use your computer? Yes. Hello? Yes. If you don't have a printer, can you still use your computer? Yes. Okay, so a printer is a peripheral. Let's put it that way. I've not yet defined it. I'm just telling you something first. Tell me something that without it, you can still use your computer. Okay. Tell me any component, any hardware. Yes. Camera. Okay. Camera. Sometimes we can connect a camera to the computer or a webcam. Now, without a webcam, you can still use your computer perfectly. Any other? Let me define what a peripheral is. Now, a computer peripheral is a device that is connected to a computer to give it additional functionalities, but is not a core system component. Does it make sense to you? Let me read it again. A computer peripheral is a device that is connected to a computer to give it additional functionalities, but is not a core system component. When you connect a peripheral, your computer gets more abilities or functionalities. But the peripheral is not a core system component. If you connect a printer, you can print, right? You will enjoy your experience because when you need to print, you can print. If someone doesn't have a printer, they can't print. A printer is not a core system component. If you have a scanner connected to your computer, you can scan documents into the computer. You have more abilities. But the scanner is not a core system component. If you have a router, you can go to the internet. That means your computer can do more things. But the router is not a core system component. So they are all peripherals. Until you get a technical understanding of what the core components are, you think that only devices that are connected externally are peripherals. As for the internal components, you think that there is no peripheral inside. But that is not so. Inside the system unit, we have a lot of peripherals. So before we can understand what a peripheral really is, we need to define the core system components. Once we know the core system component, every other thing is a peripheral. So what is a peripheral? Listen, most peripherals are external to the computer case, and that is true. Most peripherals are external, and almost everything external is a peripheral. Every component we connect externally is a peripheral. Have you seen the back of a system unit before? You'll see that there are several ports for different connections. Anything that will be connected to a computer is a peripheral. And that is very easy to understand. However, some peripherals are internal. However, some peripherals are what? Hello. That is a part that you need to add to your understanding. When we say some peripherals are internal, what comes to your mind? What does it mean? This is a very old computer. Really, really old. Do you see this particular component? Have you seen it before?
Yes.
This component. What is it called? Let me show you the component I'm talking about. We'll be taking the components one by one, but let me show you the one I'm talking about. Is it this one? Is this what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay, so this is what I'm talking about. This component, what is it called? From today, keep it in your mind that it is called the optical disk drive. Optical disk what?
Drive.
Because when we talk about optical disk, we are talking about CDs, DVDs, and Blu-ray discs. They are called optical discs. We'll have a lesson into optical discs themselves, and you'll learn about them. Now, an optical disk drive, or ODD, is a disk drive that uses laser light to read data from and write data to optical discs, such as CDs, DVDs, and Blu-ray discs. Can you see this? Okay, so CDs, DVDs, and Blu-ray discs are called optical discs. And the disc, it is disc with C, not disc with K. Disc with C. So there are three types of optical discs, or three main types of optical discs. We have CDs, DVDs, and what? Have you seen a CD before? I just showed you one. Have you seen a DVD before? I just showed you one. Maybe you've not seen a Blu-ray disc or BD before, but it looks just like this. The difference is the storage size. Are you with me? The difference is the storage size. All right. Now, the reason why we came here was that we wanted to point out that this drive, this is a drive. Do you see a CD inside it? So this is a drive. The drive is what is used to read the data from and write the data to the optical disc. If you have an optical disc drive, you use a drive to read data from optical disc, and we also use it to write data to optical disc. In IT, we use the terms read and write. When we say read, it means you are accessing information or data. So when you are accessing data from a CD, do you know that there's data on a CD? When you are accessing the data, it means you are reading the disk. When you are writing to the disk, it means you are storing. So the device that does that is this drive here. It's called optical disk drive. Now my question is, this optical disk drive, is it internal or external? Is it internal or external? Hello? Is it internal? Please, I showed you a picture here. The optical disk drive, is it internal or external? It's internal. It's internal. And if you disconnect it, your computer will still work perfectly without a problem. Does it mean it's a peripheral or not a peripheral? Pardon? It's a peripheral. Even though it is internal, it is what? It's a peripheral. The fact that it is internal does not mean it's not a peripheral. And the fact that something is internal does not mean it cannot be a peripheral. Today, our job is to discover the parts of the computer and understand how they work. Before we do that, we need to understand what computer peripherals are. And we have learned that peripherals are components that are connected to the computer to give it additional functionalities, but are not part of the core system component. Most peripherals are external to the computer case. However, some peripherals are internal. Did you see that? Hello. Now listen. And others, though being peripherals, are essential for the computer to properly function. This is where people get lost a little bit. In other words, a computer system cannot properly function without some particular peripherals, such as the hard disk drive and the RAM. So wait a minute. Do you mean a hard drive is a peripheral? Do you mean the RAM is a peripheral? I thought peripherals are components that without them the computer can still work. But are you saying the hard drive is a peripheral, RAM is a peripheral? Because we know that without a hard drive the computer cannot start, can't boot. Without a RAM you can't boot your computer. So what in the world are we talking about? Now are we confusing the whole thing? No. Before you can understand this, we need to understand what the core system components are.
Are you having trouble setting up your computer? Are you feeling overwhelmed? Don't worry, take a deep breath. You already have everything you need, you just need to put it together. Today I'm going to show you step by step how to set up a desktop computer. First, you'll want to unpack everything from the box and remove any plastic covering or protective tape. Think about where you want your workspace to go and how you want the different components to be arranged. Now's the time to decide before you start plugging things in. Next, we're going to connect the monitor. If you have an all-in-one computer where everything is built in, for example an iMac, you can skip this step. Otherwise, locate your monitor cable, which should look something like this. It might be blue to make it easier to identify, or it might be a slightly different shape. It just depends. Now find the monitor port on the back of your computer case and plug the cable in. Most cables are designed to fit a certain way, so if it's not working, don't force it. Make sure you have the right one, then tighten the screws to fix it in place. When you're done, connect the other end to your monitor. Now it's time to plug in your keyboard and mouse. For your keyboard, take a look at the cable. If it has a round PS2 connector, plug it into the purple port on the back of the case. If it has a USB connector instead, you can use any of the ports you see here. The same goes for your mouse. If it has a light green PS2 connector, use the color-coded port. If it has a USB, plug it in here. You could also use the USB port on your keyboard if your keyboard has one. If you have a wireless mouse or keyboard, it's going to work a little differently. Some connect using technology that's built into your computer, others need an adapter. You may want to read the instructions that came with your wireless mouse or keyboard to find out how it works. At this point, you should plug in your speakers or headphones if you have some you want to use. Just look for the audio port on the front or back of your computer case. Many computers have color coding here too. The green port is for speakers or headphones. The blue port is what we call the line in, which can be used with other types of devices. Some speakers, headphones, and microphones have USB connectors instead of the usual audio plug. These can be plugged into any USB port. Finally, it's time to connect the power supply cables and plug the computer in. Your computer should have come with 2 of these. One goes with your monitor, and the other plugs into the back of your computer case. Now plug both cables into a surge protector. If you don't have one, you can plug the cables directly into the wall. However, this is not recommended. A power surge can damage your computer if it's not plugged into a surge protector. When you're ready, plug the surge protector into a regular outlet. If yours has a power switch, you may need to turn it on. That's all there is to it. Pretty simple, huh? It sure is. Now you can take a minute to make sure you're happy with your workspace, then turn your computer on.
So to understand what peripherals really are, you need to understand that the core components are the CPU, the motherboard, power supply, and the computer case. Technically speaking, everything else is considered a peripheral device. Although most people use the term more loosely to refer to devices external to the system. That's why I'm saying that when we talk about peripherals, people usually think they are external, and it makes a lot of sense to think that external components are peripherals, and it's true they are, but it doesn't mean that all peripherals are external. We also have internal peripherals, and it doesn't mean that without peripherals a computer should be able to work. There are some peripherals that the computer really depends on, even though they are peripherals. Peripheral devices can be external or internal. For example, a printer is an external device that you connect using a cable, while an optical disk drive is typically located inside the computer case. Internal peripherals are also referred to as integrated peripheral. Computer peripherals are dependent on the computer system since they cannot do much on their own and only become functional when connected to a computer system. For example, a printer cannot do much by itself. It only becomes useful when connected to the computer system. So we have internal peripherals, we have external peripherals. The term peripheral also does not mean that it is not essential for the function of the computer. Some devices, such as a printer, can be disconnected and the computer will keep on working just fine. However, when you remove the monitor of a desktop computer, the computer can no longer be used. Of course, the system unit will run. If a keyboard is connected, certain functions can be activated, but I've never seen someone using a computer fully without any display. If it's a server, most of the time servers don't have displays, they are just connected, but they are controlled somewhere, and where they are controlled, we use monitors to connect to them. So when you are controlling even servers, you will use monitors to control the servers, even though servers are connected without any keyboard and mouse or display. Types of peripheral devices. There are many different peripheral devices, but they all fall into 3 general categories. We have input devices, output devices, storage devices. Input such as mouse and keyboard, output such as monitor and printer, storage such as hard drive and flash drive. So storage devices are peripherals, or we have these 3 categories of peripherals. Any peripheral you find will fall into one of these categories. Some devices fall into more than one category. Consider a CD-ROM drive, which can be used to read data, that is input, and can also be used to write data, that is output. So there are three categories or types of peripherals: input, storage, and output. All right. Now I'm going to show you the 4 components, and then we will start picking all the components one by one. All right. So most computer desktops system units look like this. Okay. When you look at the back, over here we have several ports here. All these ports will take time and study them. All of them, all these ports, we will learn what they are. But my job here right now is to open the system unit and show you the 4 core components of computer hardware. Now, most system units or computer cases have lockers here, and to open it, you just hold the locker and you open like this. Most of the time there are no screws. Sometimes there's a big screw that you can even use your hand to turn, but most of the time there are no screws, and most of the time there's a locker like I used to open it. Now, the reason why they give you a locker or a handle, let me call it a handle, that you can use to open the system unit is because the system unit will be opened, and the components in the system unit will be changed or will be worked on. When computers are manufactured, they are not manufactured to deny you access into the system unit. As a matter of fact, access is easily granted inside the system unit because you have to open it one day to do something within it. So inside the system unit, there are a number of components and wires. We'll get into all of them, but I just want to remove the 4 components we just read about. So to do that, I'll put this system down and choose a different one. Alright, so this is a different system unit, and there are several components we have already loosed. So this one here, we will learn what it is. You need to know what this is. Very simple. This we have already talked about. What is this? What is this? This is a optical disk drive. You can't say optical disk because this is not an optical disk. This is never an optical disk. Just like someone said DVD. This is not a DVD. A DVD is an optical disk, but this is a drive. Every drive has connections where we connect to the system for it to read data, and can also be used to write data. This one here is an optical disk drive. When you press this, the tray will come out. You can put an optical disk within it, and you push it back in, and data can be read. So this is a drive, optical disk drive. You can call it the CD drive or DVD drive. There's nothing wrong with that. Is that okay? All right. Now let's get into the core components. The first one I'll talk about here is this. What is this? Okay, this is a power supply unit. Okay, it's called the power supply unit, or PSU. PSU. PS what? PSU, or power supply unit. and sometimes we just call it power supply. Now this power supply unit, what does it do? What does it do? Who can tell me? Okay, someone is saying it supplies power to the computer system. How does it supply power to the computer system? Is it an ECG warehouse, or what do you mean? It supplies power to the computer system. Is it a battery? Because battery can supply power, right? So why do you say it supplies power to the computer system? I don't understand. You are right. So over here, it takes power from the wall outlet. It takes main power from the wall outlet. The main power is connected here. When the main power is connected here, this one distributes power to all the internal components through the different wires we see here. So all the wires coming from this power supply unit are used to supply power, not data, power to all the internal components within the system unit. So this is a core component, the power supply unit. It supplies power to all the internal components. Please, are you here? Okay, to supply power, first of all, it receives power connection from here. So from the wall outlet, you plug your power cable here into this power socket, and then power is distributed to all the internal components using the various wires we see here. Is that okay? Okay, so this is the power supply unit. Then we said the motherboard, right? Okay, please, have you seen this? What is this? This is a motherboard. So this is also one of the core computer components, right? This is a motherboard. And then we said, what else is part of the core components? The CPU. Where is the CPU? All the components are removed. Did you see CPU? So where is the CPU? So someone is saying the CPU is on the motherboard. Okay, so let me open this locker here and raise this thing here and remove one chip here. This chip I'm removing, is that the CPU? Okay, so this chip here is the central processing unit. This is the CPU, and this is the main computer. This is the main computer. Every other component or every other hardware is there to help this hardware. This is the computer. And this computer here, or CPU here, is resting somewhere here inside a socket we call the CPU socket. Alright, so we've all seen what the motherboard is. We've all seen the CPU. Did you see the CPU? Alright, so the last thing is the computer case, right? So over here we see an empty case, right? So this is a computer case. The motherboard is right here, and later we will go onto the motherboard and learn the components on the motherboard so that we understand what is connected anywhere. And we'll also look at the input-output ports at the back of the motherboard. These ports are the ports that appear behind the system unit. So when you turn the system, when you look at the back of the system unit, you see several ports. Those ports are all on the motherboard. So we'll be studying about them. Alright, so today we've looked at the definition of computer hardware the definition of computer peripherals, and we've looked at the core components of the computer system. We've also learned that there are three types of peripherals. We have input peripherals, outputs, and storage. So next time we will talk about a list of hardware components. So it's not just peripherals, but all hardware components. So we'll pick the hardware components one by one and look at their functions and what they do. And again, these things are very basic. Asking you about the power supply unit is a very basic, extremely basic question. Asking about the optical disk drive or hard disk drive or RAM or motherboard is extremely basic. These are not things that technicians need to learn. These are things that every computer literate needs to know, and they are important. So we have a lot to learn, we have a lot to cover, but right now we are looking at the computer components, and we'll be done with that soon and we'll move on to other things. So because we've got into the next subtopic, I want to end the lesson here. Next time we'll go into details and talk about the components one by one, but then the components we've talked about, I will ask everyone a question and then we'll close.